Okay, so we'll continue on with the topic democracy and development. And today we're going to talk about, we'll continue with assessing Lula da Silva and the Labour Party experiment in Brazil. And then we're going to touch upon hierarchical market economies in Latin America as a variety of capitalism, and in a way of how to assess the operation of the capitalist economies in Latin America after the deregulation of the foreign investment there, and the more integration into global market and the intensification of neoliberal measures. So last time we stopped at how Lula da Silva actually represented kind of continuity and extension of Cardoso's neoliberal market economy. He actually capitalized on decreasing, dissatisfaction with his administration and increasing fears of the return of hyperinflation crisis and the high level of unemployment rate, in addition to the corruption and the scandals with regard to the privatization measures and selling off the state-owned enterprises that led to more concentration of ownership and more kind of public engaging or involving in illegal public contracting. So he actually continued with the same neoliberal market measures or market economy, with with an emphasis on social security programs, in order to stay true to the main policy programs, or the main policy program of the Labour Party, which focused mainly on the discourse of social justice and participatory democracy. So let's see how actually the Labour Party performed, when it reached power in 2002, and actually Lula managed to get re-elected in 2006. And Dilma Rousseff actually continued, with the same policies that eventually led to the impeachment because of the engagement of the same corruption and the same scandals. So let's assess, as I mentioned last time, we are going to focus on assessing his economic performance with regard to this market-oriented policies, how he implemented, how he continued, how he extended and continued with the implementation of the same market-oriented policies, and to what extent he improved, this macroeconomic indicators with regard to GDP per capita, economic growth, and deregulation of foreign investment and free trade as well. And then we are going to talk about, the social indicators and the social policies, and to what extent he managed to uproot the structural causes of poverty and inequality. And he didn't. He actually expanded and extended, the scope of the beneficiaries of the social policies or the social safety nets, but without, tackling, the root causes of the social inequality and high level of poverty rate there. And then good governance as one component of the development and democratic governance as well. So macroeconomic indicators or economic performance, social policies and social indicators, and corruption and good governance. So let's start. What the main economic problem in Brazil that historically actually led to social and political instability there. So one is targeting inflation, hyperinflation rate, and hyperinflation crisis. So achieving monetary stability and retaining fiscal health, these one of the priority or economic policies that actually that had to target, the inflation rate, was one of the main policies, had to be followed in order to maintain stability and political stability and social order. So Lula actually had to tackle the same issue as Cardoso did. And as I mentioned last time, Cardoso did a good job with regard to decreasing, the inflation rate and increasing the economic growth rate. So he actually followed in the same steps by taking, or proceeding with the same measures in order to open, the domestic market to capital inflows, by taking, some measures to deregulate, to guarantee like free trade, and to strengthen and to attract, capital inflows, especially international capital. And he followed, the same restrictive monetary policies with regard to, in order to target and control the inflation. So he had to increase the interest rate, but that was like at the expense, in order to maintain and target stability, but that was at the expense of discouraging, domestic investment, and disencouraging, demands for in the domestic market. So this actually, he maintained fiscal stability by implementing, or actually extending and the same restrictive monetary and fiscal policies, and he increased, but he actually proceeded with increasing, revenues, and increasing, the mobilizing, more resources from taxation system. He increased, the revenues from the taxes, and he managed to upgrade the agribusiness sector by increasing, the exports from the agricultural sector, in order to retain, this balance of payment, the health of the balance of payment, and to restore, the balance between exports and imports. And he actually redirected the public investment towards infrastructure, especially transportation and energy sectors, and this helped with decreasing, public debts. But as I mentioned last time, like high interest rate and appreciation of the currency, these policies were essential in order to target and to control the inflation rate, but it didn't, help with increasing, economic growth and encouraging, demands for domestic goods or in domestic investment, and creating demands for subsequently for domestic goods. In order to tackle this structurally, they had to disturb, the balance between different classes in Brazil, that historically actually disturbing and provoking these upper classes and internationalized bourgeoisie and domestic bourgeoisie, led to military coups and high level of political instability. So in order to tackle this structurally and to root out, the causes of this structural problems and fiscal imbalances, he had to structurally transform and reform the taxation system that would disturb, the interest of the upper classes and the main stakeholders in Brazil, and the pension system that actually benefited some of the well-off groups and classes benefited from this system. And the Cardoso and Lula didn't really manage to tackle these two main structural and comprehensive and deep structural reforms. So they did well with regard to improving, the macroeconomic indicators with this macroeconomic management, and they proceeded with some sort of social programs in order to tackle and to address, this social high level of poverty and social inequality, but they didn't offer like a structural solution or remedy, for these deep-rooted structural problems. So here you have comparison between Cardoso and Lula, and how actually they Lula managed to improve, the macroeconomic indicators. So this kind of with regard to economic performance, he increased, the GDP per capita in comparison to the average, rate during Cardoso's rule. He increased the GDP growth to 3.4 in comparison to 2.3 under Cardoso. And with regard to GDP per capita growth, he actually managed to increase it to 2.7 in comparison to 0.7 in the average rate. And then you have here, like with regard to trade, so I don't know, like he actually increased, the percentage of the free trade with to the GDP per capita, or to the GDP in Brazil, in comparison to Lula, I think. But I think this, like the gray thing did hide this, but he increased it to I think 21 or 22%. And he managed to decrease, the inflation rate as well, from 14.9 under Cardoso to 6.6. And with regard to the international reserve in US dollars, he actually increased it, actually exponentiated, this international reserves in comparison to Cardoso. So with regard to social policy and tackling, inequality as one of the main structural problem in Brazilian economy, and the issue of social and economic development there, he continued, with the same social security programs, and he actually expanded, the social spending and social expenditure in order to boost, family income, and offered subsidies there. One of the most important program there, one of the actually the biggest, conditional cash transfer program there, Bolsa Familia. He offered, some sort of financial support to families, and expanded the scope of the families that benefited from this program, in order to the families with monthly income which is below the minimum wage. And that was conditional in order to tackle, the issue of health and education as well. So they offered, the government actually offered some financial support to these families, but that was conditional support, that they have to send their children to school, and they had to make some sort of checkup, every regularly. So he actually managed to transfer some funds, and offer and to offer some subsidies, to these families. But this is actually didn't offer like a remedy for these severe issues of poor healthcare programs, and poor quality of education. This led to like slight improvement of Gini coefficient. So here you see like a slight decline, with this income inequality, but it's not that big. So with the other like social indicators here, he did well with regard to the unemployment rate. He decreased slightly, like he didn't do well with regard to the unemployment rate, but with the per capita social public expenditure, he increased it slightly to from 21.4% to 22.4%. And as well here, with the per capita social public expenditure with regard to the health sector, he increased it to from 3.9 to 4.6. It's a slight increase. He actually channeled some funding to social programs, but it didn't actually lead to structural and meaningful transformation or improvement in these indicators. That was until 2008. With the poverty rate as well, like declined slightly. And here you have like the Gini coefficient with the slight improvement from 50, almost 60 in the mid 90s to 55.3 in 2007. So he actually made some sort of a slight improvement with regard to social inequality or income inequality, but there remains some sort of social deficiencies with regard in the social front, with enormous, social inequality, and this kind of dismal rate of poverty. So one of the most important issue during Lula's rule and Labor Party's reign, generally speaking, the issue of corruption and good governance. because the party, before reaching power, the party was one of the main advocate of a clean government, but that actually proved to be like rhetorical discourse rather than actual application of specific steps or policies in order to guarantee this clean government and to reduce corruption in Brazil. One of the main informal rule or informal institution in Brazil was like transferring some funds in order to enable or to support some candidates to get elected to the parliament, and in exchange for some sort of support to the executive legislation. So actually Lula broke, with this tradition, and he actually refused to share control over resources in a form of distributing some material, some ministerial posts, and thousands, filling, thousands of bureaucratic positions, by offering, these candidates, some sort of bureaucratic positions and ministerial posts. He actually broke with this tradition of clientelistic traditions by transferring, some benefits and material and distributing spoils and sharing, control over resources in order to get, their support in Congress. So in return, he had to resort to alternative mean in order to get some sort of financial support. So he resorted to some involved in corruption and like vast public contracting, kickback schemes and illegal campaign financing and offshore accounts. So that was the main issue that led to the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff in 2014, because of allegedly the party engagement in this illegal financing and transferring, some money from the state bank in order to finance the budget deficits. So actually, that was like the main and the crucial issue that actually distorted and discredited the image of the Labour Party in Brazil, and eventually actually led to it gave way to Bolsonaro and the right winger to appeal to large segments in Brazilian society. And as well, like before reaching power, the Labour Party counted heavily on this grassroots participation and these kind of grassroots communities in order to participate in decision making. So it was like one of the main advocate of participatory democracy, and offering, some space for social movements or grassroots community in order to have a say in decision making. So after reaching power, Lula actually got detached from the social base, his social basis, and the social basis of the party, and this actually triggered some sort of resentful feeling and anger, because they felt betrayal. They felt like they were betrayed by the Labour Party after reaching power, because of most of the decision actually the decisions were taken behind closed doors, and this led to internal divisions within the party itself. He alienated, some of the party members, let alone, the social movements or the grassroots that actually supported him to get elected, as a president. So in total, like with regard to macroeconomic performance, both Cardoso and Lula managed to continue or to extend or to expand the same policy programs, the economic and social programs actually Cardoso started, and he managed to do well and to improve, the main indicators, the GDP growth and GDP per capita, and to proceed with this deregulation of free trade, to abide by this free trade procedures, and to deregulate more the foreign investment, and this helped with some sort of restrictive fiscal and monetary policies, they both actually managed to target inflation rate. And Lula actually, as the main point here, how like moderate left continued or offered more added like human face to neoliberal policies without turning the model upside down. That was in comparison to what they call what Weiland and Madrid mentioned, contestatory leftist or populist leftist in Bolivia and Ecuador and Venezuela that we studied before. So here, one example of moderate left, how when they reached power, actually they adopted moderate discourse. They didn't campaign on the same happened, with Concertación in Chile. So they managed to find a common ground with the other opposition without campaigning on populist discourse or anti-establishment or anti-elitist platform. And they continued with the same policy programs and added, made the policy, actually the neoliberal policies, as they mentioned, more friendly, as Lula actually himself or the Labour Party actually proclaimed. And the Labour Party did relatively well with regard to the macroeconomic indicators, and with regard to poverty and inequality indicators is slightly well, but they didn't tackle, the structural causes, as I mentioned, of this high level of social inequality and poverty and high rate of poverty. And this had like some historical roots, because in order to tackle this structurally, he had to disturb, the interest of the main like stakeholders or the upper classes in Brazil that historically led to military intervention and social polarization, deep social polarization. One crucial factor or one important element in development as well and democratic governance is good governance, and how to tackle issues like corruption and increasing or offering participatory channels for social actors in order to have a say in the decision making process. And that actually didn't happen in Brazil. After reaching power, Lula actually concentrated power in the executive, and he even refused to share control over state resources with the opposition or with the other parties in order to gain their support. The negative side of this, he had to resort to alternative means in order to get some revenues or to secure some financial inflows in order to support his policy programs. And this actually distorted the image of the Labour Party that got involved in many corruption scandals. And in the climax, or the process, culminated into the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. So one other factor with regard to assessing or evaluating, the performance of capitalism or capitalist economies in Latin America is to pay attention to the main market players and how they interact with each other, and to what extent they even like the policies adopted in different areas, like in the business domain and labor market domain, how they actually complement each other and they actually perpetuate the same development or economic policies that may have negative or positive implications for the economic performance. So the central point here, Ben Ross Schneider offered or introduced a concept of hierarchical market economies in order to capture, the capitalist or the market economies in Latin America after, the implementation of neoliberal policies and deregulating foreign investments. that actually led to created, some sort of features that eventually created, this aspect of hierarchical market economies, especially in the big countries there, like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, and Colombia. That this is as one variety of capitalism or capitalist economies. So the concept actually coined by Peter Hall and David Suskes in 2001 in order to make a distinction between liberal market economies and coordinated market economies. Liberal market economies that prevailed in the United States and and Britain or the United Kingdom, and coordinated market economies became like prominent in Germany and some other Western European countries. So he introduced, this hierarchical market economies that actually shared some qualities of both of them, of the liberal and coordinated, but actually it's more than a mix of both of them. It's not like a mixture or a hybrid form of both of them. So with regard to like liberal market, like the job training and the creation of job opportunities are not these kind of processes of job training and job creation. They are not like market-based. They are not left to the market mechanisms, to the supply and demand, but actually it's negotiated and between major and giant firms that actually controlled by big families or multinational corporations. So it's not like negotiated or left to entirely to the market or to the market mechanisms in order to create them. But the job creation and job training and these kind of generating opportunities, these were these were like kind of decisions that related to the firms and business associations. And this is what Schneider actually mentioned, that it's not like after making the shift from state-led development to what's called market-led development. It's neither like state-led development nor market-led development. It's business-led development. They actually controlled the main aspects of the economy or the market transactions. And with regard to the coordination between capital and labor, it's totally lagged in Latin America because of this kind of within the firm. There is kind of a hierarchical relationship between like the owners and the employers and employees. So there is a lack of any channel or any institutionalized channels to intermediate or to the relationship between employer and employees. There is no kind of formal procedures. Labor, can channel their grievances and their demands through these institutionalized channels that is vertical and hierarchical by nature. And what actually made it worse is the size of unions and the membership in these kind of unions actually declined after making the shift to the market economies. So they didn't have any organized channel in order to negotiate on their behalf. So with these kind of hierarchical market economies, Schneider focused mainly on four main features or aspects that they interact with each other, and they created some sort of political complementarities and mutually reinforcing processes that affected the performance of capitalism and the developmental affected the trajectory of the developmental policies in Latin America. So so these four aspects or features are this kind of diversified business groups where I'll get to this like shortly, like these diversified business groups and the existence of multinational corporations is one of the pivotal players in the economic structure or economic system there. So with regard to this business groups, they are like family-owned and controlled diversified grupos or groups. They are actually family-based and controlled by big families, and the rest actually they were subsidiaries of multinational owned by multinational corporations. So they dominated, you know, the market, and they had like the giant market share in the big, you know, countries in Latin America, and they controlled, you know, the market transactions and the regulation of the main regulation of even like financial market as well. With some sort of the coordination between them, they substitute for the financial market. And with regard to the labor, so this is like one of the core spheres, the business and firms, that, you know, this sphere is predominantly occupied and controlled by diversified family business or family groups and multinational corporation. And with regard to the labor, or it's atomized labor relations and low-skilled labor. Because of the absence of this institutional channels that intermediate, you know, the relationship between, or to negotiate, you know, the position and the rights of the labor with regard to the owners, and with the small size of unions, this created, you know, this atomistic, you know, relationship between labors, and continued or perpetuated, you know, the low-skilled workforce, because they didn't have any organization or any channel to negotiate training programs or education programs. So there is, as I'm going to say shortly, so there is no incentive to invest in vocational training and education to improve their skills. That eventually led to low skill trap in Latin America, and subsequently perpetuated the same issue, or the dismal record of social inequality, because of like education and training and having like skilled workforce. These are important factors in order to invest in human capital and to improve, you know, this records of or indicators of social and economic inequalities. And actually, it's hierarchical, like market economies with salient presence of multinational corporations as like international and internationalized bourgeoisies, or upper classes, or business associations, that they had like this kind of international connections and outward oriented strategies. But it's more than the concepts. Actually, the hierarchical market economies and this kind of varieties of capitalism would it actually focused on some neglected areas. It's more than replication of the same assumptions and prepositions of dependency theory. So it's still like the economy is dependent on international market and embedded in this kind of vertical relationship in the commodity chains and with some international firms or international actors. But what's unique with regard to the concept, or focusing on these features and aspects of hierarchical market economies, is focusing attention to, or giving independent account of different forms of corporate governance. So instead of just describing, you know, the main political activities of these business associations and foreign firms, or deducing, you know, their behavior from other factors. So the concept would offer independent help with developing independent account of different forms of corporate governance, in order to focus on how business actually business associations like grupos and MNCs actually led the development strategies and control the development policies in Latin America. And again, the literature focuses heavily on this political role of the labor unions or trade unions, especially with the creation of labor-backed parties during the period of import substitution industrialization, and what happened after the dismantling, you know, corporate structure and shifting, you know, away from the import substitution industrialization to market-oriented policies. The studies actually focus heavily on the political role of the trade unions or labor movements. But here, with the concept of hierarchical market economies, the focus actually shifted towards the skills and training and education as like part and parcel of assessing, economic performance or the capitalist economies in Latin America. And with this dual focus on forms of corporate governance and skills and training, investment in training and education of labor force or workforce, to have like skilled workforce, this would enable like economic experts or policy makers, or to offer some policy recommendations, because these features actually complement each other. There is kind of institutional complementarities between both of them, as we are going to see shortly, and there's kind of mutually reinforcing tendencies between these features. So this would enable decision makers to pinpoint or to offer like a diagnosis of the existing problems, and to offer some policy recommendations if the main target is to tackle the same problems, that the same problems actually these like hierarchical features have been triggering. So focusing on the four features of hierarchical market economies, in order, like diversified business groups, multinational corporations, atomistic, labor relations, and low-skilled labor force or workforce. So with this kind of diversified business groups, so the issue here to map out, these core spheres of market interactions and transactions. So here, like the giant, the family-controlled or the dominant business associations, they were diversified into subsidiaries. And with developing some sort of connection with a multinational corporation, but actually they had like little market and technological relations. So the thing is, a small number of groups or these family groups, they had like huge market share, roughly speaking, like 1/5 of the GDP in some countries. But these firms actually didn't invest in in technological sector. And this actually has some implications for developing, skills and having skilled labor force, as I'm going to say shortly. And these like diversified business groups, they had like some sort of hierarchical control over dozens of separate firms. This kind of centralized control, and alongside with this concentrated, ownership, it didn't allow for, and still like, it doesn't allow for any kind of negotiation with shareholders and multiple owners. So actually, with this kind of concentration of ownership and centralized control over separate firms, and non-investment or investment in service and non-tradable sectors, this actually had important implications and repercussions for the economic system, because the multinational corporations actually dominated technological sectors and boxed out, these business groups from the technological sectors that they didn't have any incentive, or they had like reduced returns by investing in these technologies because of the existence of the multinational corporations. And at the same time, they don't transfer any capital. Multinational corporations, as here, they don't transfer any kind of capital and technology that would help with developing, skills and creating, indigenizing or homegrown technological sector that would actually boost economic growth and would lead to more diversification in the economic structure. So with the multinational corporations, it actually had a long history because of the existence of the interest of the United States in Latin America. So that throughout the 20th century, huge companies, American companies, actually invested in different sectors like transportation, electricity, and transportation system in Latin America. And this created like huge intra-firm trade between the United States and Latin America. But again, with this hierarchical fashion of management, it ended up not trading between equal buyers or sellers, but it was more like shipping order from the MNC or from the American companies to the counterparts in Latin America. So it was like with no kind of capital and technological transfer that actually reproduced the same feature of hierarchical market economies. So even the domestic firms, or that actually the export firms that actually are not owned by multinational corporations, as I mentioned, they were embedded into this kind of vertical relationship in the global market or the global economy. And they had like dependent kind of, or they had like this vertical relationship in the chain of in the commodity chain of the global market. So what added to this, by enabling ownership and acquisition, domestic acquisition, this led to more concentration of ownership and reducing the firms actually listed on the local stock exchanges in some countries in Latin America. So the market actually is dominated by MNCs and grupos, or family-controlled and diversified groups, with little with some sort of shallow coordination between them, without any sort of capital transfer or developing this kind of horizontal relationships between domestic firms and international players or international firms. So I'm going to talk how like these like interact with each other in order to reproduce the same problematic economic and social issues in structural problem, to reproduce the same structural problems in capitalist systems in Latin America. And then with the atomized labor relations or employee relations in Latin America, with after the end of the import substitution industrialization and the decline of union memberships, so they lack like laborers, they lack any organizational basis that would negotiate or to bargain, with the owners in order to get some benefits or to improve their working conditions. And with the implementation of the neoliberal, policies as well, countries promulgated or issued like streams of legislations in order to organize capital-labor relations, and these legislations actually undermined or eroded the collective bargaining of labor or trade unionists, because it actually it eliminated, these legislations actually eliminated, it took off like it took like several matters from of the it actually. So before, actually during the import substitution industrialization, trade unionists negotiated working conditions, pay increase, and right to strikes, and different other like social safety security programs. So what happened after the implementation of neoliberal policies? It actually eliminated, some apart from or other than, wages. So trade unions and laborers are not allowed, to negotiate or to have like compromise or to have like some benefits with regard to rights to strikes and other like other forms of social and social policies and social benefits. So matters other than wages are not negotiable. after the promulgation of these neoliberal legislation that rearranged or organized the relationship between capital and labor. It actually undermined their bargaining position, not to mention like co-opting, the top personnel of the trade unions and declining in the diminishing, the diminishing size of union membership. It added to the main problem that they didn't have any interlocutor, with the firm, and they were embedded in this hierarchical structure within the firm after neoliberal measures. So low investment or low level of education and vocational skills, and the main features or the structural aspects and features of this of hierarchical market economy, it actually keeps reproducing the same low level of skilled workforce. So there is no investment at all, no incentive actually to invest in training programs, because of like this kind of poaching discouragement effect. Like if a company or if a firm actually decided to invest in training and education programs, so this would lead it would have like good caliber, that they would like move to other firms, or other firms would create demands for or to hire, trained workers. So it's kind of a coordinating problem, and the rational the rational firm there, as a rational player or a rational actor, wouldn't invest in the first place in training programs, in order not to allow for like this move of trained workers. So how actually they sustain each other and they keep reproducing, and how they reinforce each other in order to reproduce the same structural features. There is kind of complementarities between business groups and MNCs. As I mentioned, like with this dominant position of the MNCs in technological sector, so the domestic and grupos or business groups, they didn't find any incentive to, because of the reduced returns, so they didn't find any incentive to invest in technological sector or in technology, generally speaking. Investment in technology required or it actually creates demands for skilled workers, and would offer incentives for business associations and firms in order to invest in education and training programs. But actually the business groups actually concentrate, they have concentrated their investment in service sectors that actually these sectors don't require high skills or technologies. So again, like reproducing the same feature of lack of investment in education and technology. And they didn't expand like rapidly. This would like focusing or concentrating in investment in service sectors. It didn't help with expanding or activities and upgrading, their productivity or institutional upgrading in these sectors, in comparison to the investment in technology and technological sectors. And it didn't create any incentive to coordinate to create like inter-firm coordination. And what added to this, by allowing or issuing some legislation that allowed for concentrated ownership and allowed for domestic buying or domestic acquisition. So like domestic firms and business groups, they didn't have like leeway in decision making, because of most of these decisions actually are taken abroad with no room for business associations and business groups to influence these decisions. So the limited number, limited scope of activities, no incentives to expanding or diversifying economies in order to reach beyond service sectors, and to invest mainly in technology in order to offer structural remedies for the structural problems in the capitalist economies. Low demands for skilled labor. It's the same. It's so they with the same, like with the main features and the main aspects and the relationship between MNCs and business groups. And here we move to we move the focus, to the issue of a skilled workforce, labor, or trained workforce. There is no incentive whatsoever to press, or to push for having like training and education, to have like more spending and more resources to be allocated for these training and education programs. So first of all, with the absence of institutionalized or intermediary channels with high level of labor turnovers. So actually the labor didn't have, like, as I mentioned, any organizational basis or any like leadership, like union leadership, to negotiate or to acquire more, to get more concessions, and to push for these training and education programs as part of their rights, and part and parcel of institutional upgrading and skill upgrading in order to improve the productivity and to push, to improve the indicators of social and economic inequality. So lack of this institutional mediation and the embedment, or engagement in these kind of hierarchical and vertical fashion of management inside within the firm, and even between the firms, like this kind of intra-firm training for skill upgrading, there's a total lag, because for them, from the position or from the point of view of foreign firms or domestic firms. So in order to invest, like domestic groups or domestic business associations or firms, these enterprises focus mainly on non-technological or service sectors that actually don't require in the first place high skills. So they don't invest in these programs. And even, like, for example, in sectors like electronics or automobiles, so instead of like training or offering, some sort of training and education to labor force, so firms would actually, with the low cost of transportation, and they're redirecting, public investment to like transportation sector, so they have like low cost to move, their activities to other region, that actually this region has high skills labor, to capitalize on the pre-existing, skilled labor, instead of creating skilled labor in other regions. So there is no kind of coordination in order to upgrade skills and to invest in these training and education programs. And from the position or from the point of view of laborers as well, so they don't have any kind of investment any kind of incentive to invest in their in upgrading their skills, or to train themselves in new skills. So actually the existing market, they don't reward the existing, the existing jobs or the existing, market opportunities don't reward for high skills. So there is like no high skills, high wage jobs. So that's why they will better off, not investing in these training in their training, or to invest in these training programs or education programs. Short job tenures as well. With this kind, if they don't have like a long-term job security, so they don't have any incentive to invest in their training and education. And this kind of move between formal and informal sector, with like a large pool actually of labor force, move to informal sectors that actually require different skills. This rapid move and short job tenures they actually they feed into the same existing, you know, lack of incentives in order to push for or to press, you know, these demands for training and education. And this like low skill trap is kind of an equilibrium in the hierarchical market economies there, that actually that's self-enforcing and self-perpetuating, you know, itself, because of this kind of no demands for skilled works and skilled workforce and skilled labor, and there is no incentives from private firms or multinational corporations to invest in these programs. So this created like a stickiness feature of these core features of hierarchical market economies, as Schneider mentioned, that the state actually plays important part in inviting multinational corporations and enabling them to function and to buy, you know, some assets and to function and to operate in their domestic markets, and this by like monopolizing or dominating the technological sector and lacking, you know, any kind of incentive of domestic business groups and controlled business groups to invest in technology. This actually precluded any form of skills upgrading and investment in vocational training and education programs. That actually very essential in order not only to accumulate physical capital, but also human capital, in order to improve social and economic inequality by investment in these education and training programs. This would create a skilled labor and workforce that actually would find, you know, some sort of opportunities in sectors that actually require high skills and would improve their living conditions. That this actually didn't happen in Latin America. So that's why it's kind of this actually leads to this stickiness, you know, of the core features of hierarchical market economies in Latin America. And in order to tackle, you know, this kind of lack of investment in domestic investment in technology and investment or improvement in records of social and economic inequality, it requires like different policies with regard to incentivizing domestic firms in order to invest in technology by like changing some regulations and laws that organize the functions and the operations of multinational corporations, that to change, you know, this strategic context within which domestic firms would make, you know, their decision in order to invest in this sector. And it actually it would lead to skills upgrading and improvement in social and economic inequality. Yeah, that's all for today, and this is actually the last week, and we covered all the themes actually listed in the course outline. So here we covered the issue of the relationship between development and democracy. We started out with the refuting or highlighting, you know, this complex relationship between development and level of development, or basically per capita income and development. That's actually highly contested in the literature. And we focused on this kind of anomalies between overachievers and underachievers, and how literature actually later makes this distinction between democratic breakdown and democratic transition. That is like these kind of structural economic causes has to be juxtaposed to other factors in order to bring about, you know, different outcomes regarding regime type. And then the issue of Venezuela, the Coppage, you know, article on economic crisis in Venezuela, and how he actually focused on the magnifying effect of corruption and the collapse of political parties there, that actually intensified the effect of the economic crisis on the breakdown or the collapse of the two-party system there, and enabling Chavez as a populist and his populist Bolivarian movement to reach power. And then we focused on economic performance of one of the moderate leftist government, and how Labour Party changed, its discourse and policy orientation after reaching power, and starting out with Cardoso, and how he actually exemplified kind of continuity with the same market-oriented policies. And we offered some assessment of his macroeconomic, the party, actually the Labour Party's economic performance and social expenditure or social policies, and to what extent he slightly improved these social indicators with remaining some sort of social deficiencies. And the crucial point, which is like one important component in development and democratic rule or democratic governance, is tackling the issue of corruption, and how the party actually abandoned, its long-standing position of clean government after reaching power. And then we ended with this concept of hierarchical market economy, with highlighting the core aspects or features and how they actually complement each other and mutually reinforce each other in order to reproduce the same structural problems, that is like lack of investment in technology and reproducing social and economic inequality. So that's all. And hopefully, we covered like almost the main essential themes and topics in Latin American politics and society. Okay, bye.